Good evening, everyone. Today's Torah reading, Dvar Torah, will be dedicated to Avram Yitzchak ben Yaakov Zev, my holy uncle Alvin Lew, who passed away this past May from COVID-19. So we have here in this week's Parsha, Parshas Ki Seitzei, Perek Chav Gimel. We have the prohibition in Pasuk Daled of Lo Yavo Amoini Ma'avi B'Kal Hashem. Basically, let's give you a quick introduction. Ammon and Moav are barred Midaraisa from ever becoming Gerim, from becoming proselytes, converts to Klal Yisrael. The Gemara learns out that this is only talking about the men and not the women. So the Torah says over here, B'Pashtus, plain simple meaning, L'yavo Amayni, this is Pasuk Dalet again, Perek Chagimel, L'yavo Amayni Moavi B'Kal Hashem, an Ammonite and a Moabite cannot come in the congregation of God. Gamdar Asiri, also 10th generation, L'yavo Lahem, shall not come. B'Kal Hashem and the Kahal of Hashem ad olam. And says the Torah, why? Al davar asher l'kidlu eschem b'lechem u'mayim b'derech b'teischem Mitzrayim, because they didn't greet you with bread and water when you left Egypt. V'asher sachar alecha is Bilam ben Pa'ar. The fact that they rented out, or they hired rather, Bilam ben Pa'ar, Mipsar aram narayim l'kal alecha, to curse you. And of course, after that, what happens after he curses you? We know the next part of the story when the curse didn't work. What happened when the curse didn't work? Basically, what happened that Hashem turned, says the next pasuk, Hashem Elohecha l'shmaya Bilam, but Hashem your God was not willing to listen to Bilam. Ya'apach Hashem Elohecha l'cha es klal l'vracha, and God basically reversed the curse from blessing to you, ki ahavcha es Hashem Elohecha, because God loved you. And it says basically that you shouldn't you shall not seek their peace nor their welfare all the days of your life. Now the question is that we know the Gemara says that the reason the women were not faulted for not being kod maladerach, basically giving you food and water, is because kol kvuda bas penima, that kol kvuda bas melech penima, basically that a woman's honor is basically that she stays inside. This is something that is very, very strange in our lives today, because unfortunately women, for the most part, have basically been mafkir themselves, and as a result, to us this may seem a little bit strange, but there is some sort of honor in this, that kol kvuda bas melech penima, that a bas melech, a daughter of a king, has her honor is by being inside. So the question is, what happened after Bilam was hired? So he went and tried to curse, and of course it didn't work. We have the famous passage of Matovu. What happened after that? They come up with this great idea to have their women go out. Gemara brings down there was a whole elaborate scheme. They were basically setting up a shuk for the Jews to sell them all kinds of wares that they did not have in the desert, such as fresh clothes. And they had an older woman giving one price, and then a younger, more beautiful woman would be given another price, and of course lure the men inside. And without getting into the gory details, basically the men wanted to have a relationship with these women, physical relationship, intimacy, and they said, no, not until you bow down to this idol. And of course the rest is history. As a result, tens of thousands of Jews died. So I ask you a question. You exempted the women from being included in the prohibition of entering Klal Yisrael because of kol kvuda bas melech penima, and that's the reason why they were not held responsible for not giving food and water along with the men. So I ask you, where's the kol kvuda bas melech penima over here by going out as harlots, by going out and enticing Jewish men? How come the Ammonite and Moabite women were not barred from entering Klal Yisrael as a result of their znus, as a result of their harlotry? So the Orach Chaim basically answers this question indirectly. There's an entire long, massive Orach Chaim. Obviously, we're not going to go through it now, but he says on this parsha, he says, "Yesh panim leimar." There's however also a valid argument to be made in contrast to the one just mentioned, which we're not going to go into what he just mentioned. She'ein lahavi raya mehavkaras l'znus mishnei tamim. Can I bring a proof to say that when the women were faulted for not greeting the men, from the fact that they lost all claim of honor when they basically acted immorally? which is kind of indirectly saying what I'm saying. He's going to give an explanation, two explanations. We're only going to go with the first one of why the women did not lose that quote-unquote excuse of kol kvu the bas melech penima by going out and being mezana. Echad anusim hoya mitzad shehevkirim hanoshim. Firstly, they were coerced into doing so since the men in whose charge they were, meaning their fathers, put them into this promiscuous situation and the women could not refuse them. In other words, Hashem is so medaktek that he even looks at the intention of the Avera. The women were not the ones that hatched this plot to go out and be Mizana. They were pushed into by their fathers. Now, Divrei Rav, Divrei Talmud, Divrei Lishem, if you have your Rebbe telling you something and somebody else tells you something opposite, who do you listen to? Kadosh Baruch Hu tells the world, don't be Mizana, don't be immoral, so why did you listen to your fathers? So Enochanami, they were granted that they were punished because of that promiscuous behavior. However, when we talk about perpetuity, the future of ever coming into Klal Yisrael, into the Jewish nation, they were not barred. So you see how carefully Hashem is medaktik over here. The men who were supposed to go out and give food and water, they refused to do it. So they're spiritually tainted. There's a lack of hakaras hatov. What's the hakaras hatov? What's the lack of gratitude over here? Because you remember way back when Avram Avinu sent two angels. Hashem in the Schus of Avram Avinu sent two angels to save Lot. What happened? Lot went into a cave with his daughters, and the whole story that there was a bottle of wine there, and Lot's daughters thought that the world was destroyed. They look behind their shoulders, and they see this huge plume of smoke, this mushroom cloud, if you will, of destruction. So they figured the world will end. So they got Lot drunk. The older one had Moav, and the other one's Ammoni, my nation, and the rest is history. But the bottom line is, Ammon and Moav owe their existence to Avram Avinu. So how could it be that your progeny, your later generations, go out and wage war and try to withhold food from the Jews? So it was the men who did that. So in other words, the men had the spiritual defect, the spiritual DNA of lack of a karsatov. We as Jews, Yehudi, we're Maida Alanis, we have gratitude, right? Maida Ani, I admit to you, Hashem, that thank you, Hashem, for giving me back my neshama. So the Jews who are the kings and queens of a karsatov are not compatible. Their spiritual operating system is not compatible with that of Ammon and Moab. However, that spiritual malady was not bequeathed, was not transferred over, not injected to the spiritual DNA of the women, and that's why the Hela Garus was able to marry Boaz, and of course David HaMelech came out of that a few generations after that. Rus's grandson was David HaMelech, and that's why women are not barred, even though they acted promiscuously, because they were not faulted for doing that. Okay. The next thing is an interesting concept of smichas a parsha. I'm very into understanding why certain parshas are connected to each other. This parsha is rife with all kinds of different halachas, hashavas aveda, cross-dressing, honest weights and measures, killing Amalek, a whole bunch of different, all kinds of different halachas. So I want to focus at the end of the parsha. It talks about fair weights and measures. It says over here in Parakhov Hey, Pasuk Yud Gimel, it says, rather Yud Daled, Lo yeh lecha b'kischa, should not be in your pocket, even v'oven gedol katana, a small and a big stone. Lo yeh lecha b'veisecha, efa ve'efa gedol katana. You should not have different versions of an efa, a small one, a large one. In other words, you can't have rigged, or shall I say, if you want to think of it in terms of dice, obviously we as Jews are not supposed to gamble, but think of dice, and when you throw them, you constantly get snake eyes, or you get double sixes, or whatever it is that you get in order to win a game of dice. So the same thing over here, you can't have dishonest weights and measures. And if you look at the next parsha, mamish, the next parsha, which is basically Mechias Amalek, right? It says over here, after a perfect and honest weight, you'll have long days if you listen to Hashem and you're honest. Then it says, Zacher es asher lecha Amalek and Pasuk Yud Zayin. Remember that which Amalek did to you, Baderach, on the way, B'tzeichem Mitzrayim, on your way out of Mitzrayim, Asher Karcha Baderach. Basically, they happened upon you on the way, Ve'iznav B'chal B'chal Shalom, and basically they struck you of all the hindermost. Midrashim bring down over here that, actually Archaim brings down that the Ananei Kabbalah make Klal Yisrael invisible, but the Erev Rav and the Bnei Dan that were not holding on the Madrega to be protected by the Ananei Kabbalah were thrown out of this protective cover, and they were basically made visible. And as a result, the Amalekites, Amalek, went after them and killed them. You were very, very tired, you were exhausted. The Layar Elokim. and they did not fear God. So the Or Chaim says something fascinating over here, a little bit of an insight, basically into why we as Jews have to hate Amalek so badly. And this little insight will explain the smichas parshas of fair weights and measures to Mechias Amalek. Now, Mechias Amalek is a very, very strange mitzvah. We as Jews, remembering the Holocaust, we use the word genocide. Genocide means the destruction of every man, woman, and child. Yet when it comes to Amalek, there's a mitzvah of Mechias Amalek that every man, woman, child, animal, everything that belongs in an Amalekite town is to be destroyed. No quarter, no mercy, kill, 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 which is absolutely something antithetical to the Jewish mind. How we as Jews are required to become killers and basically slaughter men, women, old women, feeble, a guy in a wheelchair, cut his head off. It doesn't matter, he's an Amaleki, destroy them. We have to understand, this is not a joke. The Borei Olam, the creator of the world, commands us to commit genocide. Why? Because this nation is so evil, they have to be marked for extinction, and if we don't destroy them, they will come back to haunt us. And the Or Chaim says over here in Divrei Maskil, the Atav Oyev Ve'agea, which is in Perek of Hey, Pasuk Yeches, you were very, very exhausted. He says over there at the end, the Heyer Akosav Batamim Shemasniim Oisa B'Libenu. By elaborating on Amalek's attack, the Torah is making us aware of reasons that will bring hatred of Amalek into our hearts. Because we as Jews are not haters, and basically we have to go against our grain, and Hashem has to inject hatred into us. We have to become haters, because if we don't hate Amalek, they will destroy us. Ki Seitzei Yisrael tzara gedola, namely that he caused the Jewish people great distress. Sheba aleihem kasheyida haneshe b'lo yediyah, by coming against them like an eagle that swoops down swiftly without any warning, without any awareness. Kamay sheramaz gam kain b'maimer karcha, as the statement in the pasuk says, that happened upon you, also indicates. From the Jews are very, very tired. So in other words, one of the terrible traits of Amalek is the fact that they're sneaky, that they waged a sneak attack. It was no honor in it. They didn't come. They didn't have any intention to declare war. They just swooped down and basically killed the weak ones. And I can go on and on with the similarities of all the evil people out there that always go after the weak ones, the uneducated ones. I'm not going to go in that direction, but I will go in one direction. Many times people do things and they say, okay, it's business. What's the business? I steal a few dollars. It's not a big deal. Says the Torah, if you have weights that are not honest, you're sneaky, you're underhanded. Well, guess who your neighbor is in the next parsha? Amalek. Don't think for a minute that being dishonest in business, that it's not a big deal. It is a big deal. You are akin to Amalek. You have imbibed, you have drunk from the vat of wine of Amalek. You have become, to some extent, a partner, a neighbor, a shachin ra of Amalek. So it says the Torah, by creating this juxtaposition, the smichas of parshas, that if you have dishonest weights and measures, you're going to be basically relegated to Amaleki status. Alvin Lew was a ish kadosh, a holy, holy man, very, very honest. Did not have a crooked bone in his body. We, his children, his friends, his relatives, my uncle as a nephew, we all have to learn from his wonderful meed of honesty, and basically promote that and promulgate that kind of behavior, and basically make everyone aware of how important it is to be honest. Thank you very much, and may his neshama be a lzecher for us in the next world and bring peace to the world. Thank you so much, and have a great evening. Thank you for listening.